The power went out for 7 seconds during our quarterly sync, and no one in the room noticed except me. I watched the lights flicker, felt the server room hiccup, then hum back to life like nothing happened. Everyone else kept arguing about invoice formatting and vendor SLAs like their files didn't just flirt with digital purgatory. That's when I knew, if I ever left, this place would eat itself alive. 12 years. That's how long I kept the skeletons in our network closet from rattling loose. Firewall patches, root access chains, disaster recovery scripts I rewrote in my pajamas after a whiskey night, and a hard drive scare. I was the duct tape behind every seamless migration they bragged about in press releases. The heartbeat monitor to a system no one else understood, and worse, no one wanted to. Grant, my boss, used to call me quiet but expensive, like I was a broken vending machine draining quarters but never spitting out a damn Snickers. He said it in meetings, chuckling like that was charming. Miranda's our ghost in the wires, he once told a new board member. Doesn't say much, but she invoices like a law firm. Everyone laughed. I smiled. Internally noted the version control backups needed checking. I didn't mind being invisible, not at first. There's a certain freedom in being ignored. You can move through the system like a phantom, rearrange architecture without permission, build failsafes no one notices until they need saving. And when you get really good, you stop needing praise. You just want respect. Or at the very least, not to be publicly referred to as overhead while you're fixing a packet loss issue he doesn't even know exists. Anyway, before I go on, let me say this real quick. If you're enjoying this story, or you just want to support someone who once had to reboot a server in a janitor's closet with a paperclip and a prayer, hit the like button. And maybe, just maybe, subscribe. 90% of you ghosts are listening without clicking anything, and it'd mean the world to the team. Keeps us caffeinated and vengeful. Back to Grant. The guy had the charm of a parking ticket and the memory of a goldfish. He couldn't tell a Linux terminal from a pop-up ad, but he was good at politics. That smug, waxy confidence that came from never getting blamed for anything because someone else always cleaned up the mess. That someone? Yours truly. We had a rhythm. He'd screw something up, like greenlighting a vendor with outdated encryption, and I'd silently reroute the traffic, patch the hole, send him an FYI email he'd never read. Then 6 months later, he'd present a security breakthrough to the board using my damn architecture diagram, with my name cropped out of the corner. The kicker? I kept letting him, because I had something he didn't. Every credential map, every root override, every fallback chain stored redundantly, both in the cloud and in my handwritten notebooks, alphabetized and offline. Why? As if you've ever watched a C-suite exec explain to the FBI how a ransomware attack happened on his watch, you start planning for the day someone finally decides you're expendable. It wasn't fear that made me paranoid. It was experience. I'd seen how they treated people who left, tossed their things in cardboard boxes like evidence from a crime scene, revoked their access mid-coffee, then blamed them when something went wrong 2 weeks later. So I documented everything, even the things I built from scratch, especially those. The mainframe failsafe, it looked like a standard dead man switch. But the final credential, the one no one else even knew was there, required a biannual key rotation I never shared. Not out of spite, just policy my policy, and I tried to warn them. I drafted onboarding manuals. I scheduled access review audits. I sent monthly reminders to Grant to approve security revisions, all ignored. Once, I even walked into his office and laid out a risk heat map that looked like a crime scene photo. He glanced at it and said, "Looks spooky. Can you dumb it down for the PowerPoint?" I dumbed it down, all right. I deleted it. People love to say, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, we'd be screwed. What they don't realize is, some of us are the bus. And we're tired of being treated like traffic cones. I was halfway through writing an incident report about a misrouted invoice API, something that could have cost us $250,000 in late fees, when Grant's assistant popped her fake tanned head into my office and chirped, "The boardroom needs you in 5. Not Grant needs you, not it's about the API error, just the boardroom needs you. Like I was being summoned to Gotham Oz. I walked in, coffee still hot, brain still in debug mode. The usual suspects were there. Grant with his $700 haircut and $5 logic. The CFO who once asked if we really needed two-factor, and Marlene from HR, flipping through a manila folder like it was a brunch menu. No one made eye contact except the CTO, Jeremy. He gave me a tight, guilty nod. That was my first red flag. Grant stood like he was introducing a magician. So, folks, as part of our new fiscal discipline framework, his new phrase of the week, we've identified key redundancies we can offload to third-party vendors. Case in point, Miranda. He motioned at me like I was a fern. She's been great, real loyal, but at $200,000 a year, that's not sustainable. A managed service provider can do this stuff with a flat SLA and no bonuses. She's a cog, not a strategist. My ears rang, like actual ringing. Not metaphorical, my heart sank crap. I couldn't even process what I was hearing because I was too focused on the fact that he said it in front of me. Not even the decency of a closed-door conversation. Nobody flinched, just a couple raised eyebrows, a cough, a scribble in the CFO's notebook. Like Grant had announced a printer lease cancellation. Not the termination of the person who had architected every single access chain, keeping their precious fintech monstrosity from imploding. The vote was unanimous. Of course it was. Jeremy kept his eyes down. Marlene smiled like she was posing for a photo she'd delete later. HR will walk you through the exit process, Grant said, already sitting back down. You've got 15 minutes to pack. 15 minutes. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I nodded, calm as an ice tray. But inside, something snapped. Not in a way you'd notice. No broken glass or dramatic speeches. Just this quiet, irreversible shift. A coldness. Like someone had poured antifreeze into my spine. In the elevator, Marlene was already babbling about Cobra paperwork and being here if I needed a reference. I looked at her and thought about how she once asked if a VPN was like antivirus, but sassier. Back at my desk, I moved methodically. Packed up my notebooks, not the server master one, that one never left my apartment, and shut down my terminal. I noticed the contractors they'd hired were already setting up in the adjacent cubicles. One was watching a YouTube tutorial on AWS. Another had a fidget spinner. Before I left, I logged into Legal's shared folder. No one had revoked my access yet, and dropped in a spreadsheet titled Pending Credential Renewals Urgent. 67 items, biannual failsafe rotation at the top, flagged in red. No one opened it. I handed my badge to the security, smiled politely, and walked out into the August heat like I'd just left a dentist appointment. Except the cavity they drilled wasn't in my tooth, it was in the foundation of the entire goddamn company. In the Uber home, I sat motionless, my bag at my feet, my fingers tracing the worn corner of my personal credential journal. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat there, thinking one thought on repeat. They think this is over. It's not even started. The office smelled like lemon-scented toner and stale ambition. I always hated that smell. I zipped up my laptop bag, slid the notebooks into my tote, minus the good one, the real one, and paused. For a moment, I just stood there in the center of my cubicle, surrounded by 12 years of quietly built dominion. Sticky notes like talismans, Ethernet cables coiled like veins, a mug that said Root Queen given to me as a joke but used religiously. Around me, replacement contractors buzzed like confused bees. One was trying to set up a Slack channel and accidentally started a group chat with our vendor escalation team. Another was staring at a blinking cursor in terminal like it had personally insulted him. It was a circus of bravado and copy-pasted Stack Overflow threads, and they were about to inherit my kingdom. Grant strutted through once, slow enough that I could feel his smirk 2 cubicles away. He clapped the new guy on the back, said something like, "Welcome to the future," then glanced at me like I was a melted ice cream cone someone forgot to throw out. I didn't give him the satisfaction of flinching. I smiled, the small, cold kind, like a goodbye kiss you plant on someone you know you'll bury later. At the front desk, Marlene handed me an exit checklist on company letterhead, as if this was a hotel checkout and not a strategic decapitation. She pointed to the section labeled Knowledge Transfer and said, "Just sign that you've completed all relevant documentation." I tapped the line with my pen. No one's asked me for a key list, or server decom logs, or the 2-step override sequence for the recovery tunnel. She blinked. "I'm sure IT has it. I am IT." She laughed like I'd told a joke. "We've got it covered. Just sign." I signed, of course. I made a point to write neatly, and I hit them with the kill shot. Just to be clear, I'm stating on record that I was not asked to hand over any final credentials or decommission protocols. "That's what we're confirming with this?" She nodded, still smiling, still clueless. "Perfect." On the way out, I walked past the server room. My server room. I resisted the urge to knock on the door like saying goodbye to an old friend. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened my Secure Notes app. One last task. I composed an email to Legal. Subject line, urgent. Q3 critical infrastructure renewals. Attached was a spreadsheet with 67 line items. Access certificates, backup authentication tokens, license keys, VPN endpoint rotations, and right there in bold, row 7, failsafe override, biannual renewal required expires, 08/31/0400 AM. I CC'd Jeremy, the CTO, not Grant. Never Grant, sent. 20 seconds later, I saw the Outlook read receipt. Unread, status stayed that way for days. The Uber ride home was quieter this time. No rage, no shock, just silence like the heavy pause before thunder. I kept refreshing my inbox out of habit, waiting for a Legal reply that never came. Back in my apartment, I made chamomile tea and lit a lavender candle, the same kind I used to burn during server maintenance windows. Rituals matter. I opened my personal credential log, made a few final notes, and flipped the page. A sticky note fluttered out. It read, "Never hand them the keys they wouldn't ask for." I stuck it back in. Then I smiled, closed the notebook, and turned on my phone's Do Not Disturb. Let the countdown begin. The first ripple hit 3 days after I walked out. I was on my couch, eating reheated Thai and watching a rerun of forensic files when the ping came in. LinkedIn message from Kyle, one of the junior sysadmins who'd somehow survived Grant's budget culling. He didn't say much. Just, "Hey, random queued, you know if we have a separate vault for VPN chains? Some routes are timing out but only intermittently." Weird. I stared at the message and chewed my pad Thai a little slower. Kyle was decent, green, but sharp enough to know when something wasn't adding up. I typed, then deleted, check the legacy tunnel. Look for the file marked Cerberus. But I didn't send it. Instead, I replied, "Not sure." I'd ask whoever took over my queue. He never wrote back. The next ping came 2 days later. This time, an internal error message screenshot posted on a tech forum by one of the new contractors, blurred out but not well enough to hide the domain. I recognized the hostname, one of our vendor sync-in points. Error code, auth loop timeout. I sipped my tea. See, the thing about designing systems no one bothers to learn is that eventually, inevitably, those systems stop forgiving you. I'd built in checks, handshakes, breadcrumb trails that seemed intuitive to me, but would feel like a Kafka novel to someone with a Surface tablet and a fresh comp TIA cert. Emails started bouncing. Internal ones. First, it was a low-level procurement chain. Then finance escalation threads. Suddenly someone noticed an entire licensing renewal confirmation never got through. That's what happens when you route emails through a custom SMTP cluster tied to a rotating passphrase only 2 people knew. One was me. The other, dead server. Jeremy, the CTO, must have caught the scent because he reactivated our old endpoint monitoring bot, probably trying to reverse engineer my process. The logs were ugly. Gaps like Swiss cheese. Audit trails with null fields where there should have been signature checks. Some entries repeated in infinite loops, my way of flagging unverified access attempts. The kind of thing that would make any auditor sweat bullets. Grant? He blamed contractor sloppiness on a Slack channel full of senior execs who didn't know an IP address from a sandwich. We're just smoothing out the kinks, he posted, as if the company's digital nervous system wasn't slowly eating itself alive from misaligned credentials and authentication failures. A small line in his update stuck with me. We've got a handle on it. You don't handle a system like mine. You negotiate with it. Every system I'd built was like a row of loaded mousetraps. Not malicious, just precise. You step wrong, you lose a toe. One contractor tried rerouting a vendor API call without the dual auth header. The system automatically blackholed the IP. He had to reinstall his dev environment from scratch. Another one tried restoring an archived instance using an outdated script. Crashed his access node. No rollback. Oops. Meanwhile, I read error logs through a private pingback still tethered to my home server. Not actively interfering, just watching. Like a ghost in the wall, smiling every time they tripped another tripwire. I'd warned them about 6 quarterly reviews ago. Grant, of course, couldn't admit he'd gutted the only person who understood the architecture. That would mean admitting he wasn't a genius for saving $200K. He was a moron who'd fired the only lifeguard and then dove into the deep end wearing ankle weights. Instead, he doubled down. Assigned Jeremy to reconstruct documentation from scraps, which was adorable, considering the only complete documentation was stored in an encrypted OneNote file labeled IF They Fire Me, with the password taped under my kitchen drawer. I took another sip of tea and watched the LinkedIn job postings balloon. Contractor turnover had already started. I saw one post that basically described my old role, only with a salary 30% higher. That's when I laughed. Loud, real, Bella deep. The cracks weren't just showing. The whole damn wall was starting to breathe. And I hadn't even touched the failsafe yet. The blackout started at 6:17 a.m. Not a flicker, not a hiccup, a blackout. The kind of digital void you only see in war games or disaster simulations. The kind where the screen goes from green to red and never comes back. The kind that sends CTOs into cold sweats and boards into emergency sessions before coffee. The primary database just died. Not crashed, died. As in, heartbeat gone, failover frozen, backups inaccessible. The read/write pathways timed out simultaneously, which shouldn't even be possible unless someone had coded a logic trap into the replication node's timeout conditions, which I had. 6 years ago, after a contractor accidentally deleted a customer payment batch and Grant said, just restore it from the cloud. There was no cloud then. There is now. But it's connected to a failsafe I designed, which only kicks in after 3 escalation steps. And that failsafe, it's locked behind a master credential chain. That master password was mine. Vendor portals dropped next, a cascade failure. The authentication tokens timed out, then auto-disabled, as intended. You don't mess with financial transaction data across 4 time zones without an airtight schedule. One missed sync with the banking partners and the whole API trust loop resets. Manually, that's if you know how to reset it. By 6:24, the internal comms were shot. Slack, Teams, even internal email servers, everything went dark. Some junior staffer tried texting Jeremy, the CTO, who was already logged into the emergency ops panel at his apartment, still wearing an old DEF CON hoodie and panic in his eyes. He ran every script I ever wrote. Rollback, the dual node hot start. Even the nuclear option, restore from cold storage and rebuild the index from scratch. But they all hit the same wall, master credential authentication required. Authorized user, M. James status, inactive. Jeremy knew what that meant. Unlike Grant, he paid attention. He remembered the quarterly check-ins where I flagged the system for future-proofing concerns. He was the one who asked what would happen if I got hit by a bus. I smiled back then and said, well, hope the bus has root access. Now, the bus had arrived, and it was them under the tires. Grant stumbled into the office at 7:05 like a man who just realized his car was stolen while he was still inside it. He barked questions, demanded answers, accused everyone and everything, until Jeremy held up the screen and said flatly, She's the only one who can unlock the failsafe. You could have heard the silence through a firewall. There's got to be a workaround, Grant snapped. Jeremy shook his head. We purged her credentials. The override was tied to her unique hardware ID. That token's gone. We can't even spoof it. Her credentials were the failsafe. Grant turned a shade of gray I usually associate with corporate liability lawyers. You mean we're locked out of our own system? Jeremy didn't answer. He didn't have to. At 7:28 a.m., the board was summoned. By 7:31, external clients began calling. At 7:46, a vendor pinged legal asking why their payment portal was throwing 502, system authentication failure. By 8:12, finance called to say payroll couldn't process because the Atris integration was spitting out encrypted user blocked. Meanwhile, I was on my balcony with a second cup of tea and a croissant, watching birds fight over a Cheeto someone had dropped on the sidewalk. My phone vibrated. Block number, then another. Then a third, voicemails, panicked, confused, slightly sweaty. I didn't answer. I didn't need to because the machine they thought they could run without me had finally done what I always warned it would. It waited. Then it broke. Then it asked politely for the only person who could fix it. And that person was currently debating whether to start her day with yoga or vengeance. The boardroom smelled like printer ink, cheap coffee, and impending doom. Jeremy stood at the head of the table, laptop open, hair still damp from a panic shower, voice cracking as he repeated the same sentence for the third time. She built the failsafe. 12 people sat around the table in varying shades of denial. The CFO was scrolling through last quarter's IT budget like it might contain a magic password. Legal was whispering into her phone, face frozen mid-cringe. One of the VPs actually said, "Can't we just call Microsoft?" Jeremy pinched the bridge of his nose. This isn't a Microsoft issue. This is our infrastructure. Miranda built it, custom, layer by layer. 12 years of logic gates, encryption protocols, custom handshakes. Half of it isn't even documented because she was the documentation. Grant was pacing, still trying to save face. No, that's not possible. She was a tech, not a strategist, just a back-end person. We hired contractors. Jeremy slammed his palm on the table. Not hard, but enough to stun the room. She was the system. The contractors are flailing, they can't even find the credential map. Miranda was the one who designed the vault rotation. She's the reason our infrastructure never failed during those third-party outages. She's the reason our vendors trusted our platform. And she's the reason it's now locked tighter than a submarine door. Silence. Then, slowly, Grant said the words that dropped like bricks in water. You're saying? She's the only one who can reset the network. Jeremy nodded. Yes, I've been digging through everything since 6:30 this morning. Termination files, HR records, asset recovery logs. There's no mention of knowledge transfer. No credential archive. No offboarding handover. The room shifted from tense to horrified. The CTO opened a folder and flipped it around for the board to see. Miranda's offboarding paperwork. Signature at the bottom. One line under documentation transfer, n/a per HR directive. Grant's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish trying to breathe air. She never gave us the password. Jeremy didn't even blink. You revoked her credentials before you asked. She told HR on record I checked that she hadn't been asked to provide any decommission protocols. HR waved her off. Signed your form, you own that. The legal rep finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. If she built the system and we have no written transfer of control, then by default, she retains sole functional authority. Someone dropped their pen. Grant sat down slowly like gravity had suddenly doubled. She's doing this on purpose. No, Jeremy replied, cold and tired. You did this. You bragged to the board that she was replaceable. You pushed her out like she was a line item. And now the line item has a name and it's the only name that matters. A beat passed, too. Then someone at the far end of the table asked, can we just ask her for the password? Jeremy closed his laptop. You can try, but I wouldn't expect charity. Across town, I was in my kitchen buttering toast when my lawyer texted. They've figured it out. Call coming soon. You ready? I looked at the screen, smiled, and typed back, they're not ready. I am. The shift had happened. I felt it like the weather changing. The power was no longer in their boardrooms or titles or budgets. The power was sitting in my little apartment, next to a toaster and a cat who refused to learn his name. They had tried to erase me. Now they had to remember every single line of code I ever wrote. Because for the first time in years, they finally knew what I knew. I wasn't just part of the system. I was the system. The first call came in at 8:41 a.m. Block number, no voicemail. I watched it ring from across the room while stirring honey into my tea like a woman with time. The second call came 4 minutes later. New number, same ringtone. I let that one ring out too. By the third call, this time Jeremy's personal cell, I figured someone in the boardroom finally remembered I existed beyond a badge number and a bullet point on an org chart. Then came the email. Subject, urgent. Infrastructure access required immediately tone. Faux professional, panic sweat bleeding through every polite word. They asked politely if I could assist in restoring access to our core platforms as a matter of shared operational urgency. They offered a temporary consulting title. They even threw in some flimsy line about respecting the legacy I'd left behind. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my attorney. His reply was swift and surgical. Subject, urgent. Infrastructure access hourly rate, $250. Retainer, $50,000, non-refundable, wire only. Terms: full consulting autonomy. No micromanagement, no intermediary approvals. Additional clause: public acknowledgement in the next investor update as lead infrastructure architect, emeritus with full credit for recovery operations. Response required within 24 hours to preserve availability. I reviewed the draft, nodded once, and gave him the green light. Meanwhile, I updated my voicemail. No bitterness, no petness, just clean, clear boundaries. Hi, this is Miranda James. I'm currently unavailable. If this is regarding my former role, please direct all inquiries to my legal representative. Have a secure day. Shortly after, I got a read receipt. And then the dance began. Grant sent a follow-up email an hour later, this time CCing everyone from the CFO to someone at legal I didn't recognize. The tone had changed. Less urgent favor, more were prepared to make this worth your time. It still reeked of desperation. They didn't understand I wasn't negotiating from a place of hurt. I wasn't out for revenge. Not anymore. That ship had sailed the second they called me a cog. What I wanted now was control. Not just of the system, but of the narrative. So I revised the consulting clause myself before sending it back. In addition to the retainer and title, they would also include my name in the official Q3 earnings statement under key contributors to business continuity, and grant me authorship credit on any public-facing infrastructure white papers for the next fiscal year. I hit send. Then I took a long walk. By the time I returned, the wire transfer had cleared. I didn't smile, not yet. There was still work to do, but it was on my terms now. Not as a replaceable cog, not as quiet but expensive, not as the woman they forgot until everything broke, but as the architect who held the keys to their digital kingdom and who finally made them pay to knock on the door. Grant didn't take it well. He never does when the spotlight shifts away from his jawline and toward accountability. By noon, after the payment cleared and the paperwork was signed, he started the blame tour. First stop, Jeremy. Poor guy didn't even get through his sandwich before Grant barged into his office demanding to know why none of the contractors had restored functionality yet, and how Miranda, a glorified sysadmin, his words, could have possibly locked them out. Jeremy calmly reminded him that I wasn't just a sysadmin. I was the sysadmin who'd kept the company from imploding more than once, usually while Grant was busy giving keynote speeches about scalable innovation in his rented TED Lite voice. Grant didn't like that. Next stop was legal. He charged in, red-faced, waving the consulting contract like it was a ransom note. "This is extortion," he shouted. Legal didn't even look up. It's consulting. She sabotaged the system. Now they looked up. She built the system, Grant. You can't sabotage something you architected, especially when you warned us repeatedly about knowledge transfer gaps. He puffed up. Well, she signed the offboarding agreement. That means she signed the old version, the lead counsel interrupted, flipping through a binder without even pretending to respect his title. The updated policy requiring mandatory credential disclosures was never retroactively signed. You pushed that rollout to Q4 to focus on morale. Your words, a silence fell. Then, as if summoned by fate, junior IT staffer knocked sheepishly on the door, sweat on his upper lip. Laptop hugged to his chest like a shield. Sorry to interrupt, but I was digging through the network documentation folders like you asked, and I found this. He slid the laptop onto the conference table and pulled up a PDF, dated 6 months prior. Title: Credential Consolidation Risk Report, authored by M. James. It was thorough, professional, included an escalation matrix, screenshots of access overlap vulnerabilities, and a final summary slide that read, "This current structure is a single point of failure. If left unaddressed, it poses significant risk to business continuity." Below it, status: rejected, too technical. Initialed by Grant. The room went still. Grant's hands clenched into fists, then released, then clenched again. This doesn't mean she didn't plan this. Jeremy spoke up, quiet and lethal. You can't scream sabotage when she warned you 6 months in advance. That's not sabotage, Grant. That's foresight. The legal team exchanged looks. Someone muttered, "We need to start prepping board language." Grant backed away like he'd just realized the floor was made of glass and he was standing over a pit of his own hubris. He mumbled something about reviewing options and retreated to his office, door shut like a tomb. Across town, I sat on a video call with a contractor who now worked for me, walking them through a clean reboot of the vendor API layer. I didn't gloat. I didn't say "I told you so." I just watched the system hum back to life, one layer at a time, as if it had just been waiting for my voice to come back. Grant may have still been CEO on paper, but in every way that mattered, he'd been quietly fired by the system itself. And I hadn't even touched his severance. At 4:03 p.m., my phone finally rang with the tone I'd been waiting for. Not the frantic flurry of blocked numbers or thinly veiled desperation from mid-level execs, but a direct line. Board member line 2. I let it ring once, then twice. Then I answered, Miranda James speaking. The voice on the other end was tight, clipped, corporate in the way only legal damage control can be. "Miss James, I'd like to formally request your assistance in restoring core systems. The board has unanimously approved the terms of your consulting engagement and recognizes your unique role in infrastructure continuity." I kept my tone even. I assume the retainer's cleared. It has. And the updated clause regarding attribution? Filed with investor relations. Your name will appear in the recovery statement. I took a breath, not out of nerves, just to enjoy the moment. Then I booted up the secure environment I'd kept on ice, logged into my isolated terminal, slid on my noise-canceling headphones, not for audio but for the sacred ritual of deep work. I cracked my knuckles once, then opened the vault. The system greeted me like an old friend, no fanfare. Just clean lines, responsive nodes, and layers of encryption that felt like brushing cobwebs off a door only I had the key to. In 37 minutes, I did what 3 contractors, 2 IT managers, and 1 rapidly unraveling CEO couldn't do in 4 days. I brought the system back from the dead. One by one, the pillars returned, primary database resynced with triple replication fallbacks, vendor APIs authenticated through a restored trust key, internal communications brought online, audit-logged, time-stamped, payment portals decrypted and returned to live status, shadow backups sealed, scrubbed, and rerouted through hardened channels. Then came the fun part. I invalidated every credential associated with the current executive access chain, softly, silently, no alarms, just a gentle digital expiration of the identities that had once controlled my system like they owned it, and I issued new credentials to people who respected the process. When it was done, I ran one final scan. Clean, stable, unbreached. I logged out. 12 hours later, wire transfer was confirmed. My account blinked with a neat 6-figure sparkle. My name appeared on the company's official statement as Miranda James, Lead Infrastructure Architect, Emeritus, instrumental in restoring full operational continuity and securing long-term system stability. Instrumental. Cute. The next day, someone leaked an internal memo. Board of Directors initiates leadership review of CEO Grant Mercer. The subtext wasn't subtle. Translation: we trusted you, you fired her. She saved us, you're next. I read it once, then deleted it. That night I stood at my kitchen window, sipping a glass of Cabernet, watching the city breathe beneath me. I felt no glee, no hunger for more, just satisfaction, the rare kind. The kind that comes when you burn the bridge but build a palace from the ashes. Replaceable cog? I whispered, half to myself. Then I smiled. Funny how the whole machine stalled without me. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.